A good afternoon. So glad that you guys have joined us. We're going to be getting some information. It can get heavy, so sometimes when you have some questions, make sure you write your questions down, or you can write your questions in the chat. For what we're dealing with today is HIV cases in the state of Ohio. A lot of times people are confused on how people are charged or what has happened, and it's time for the laws to change. That's why we're going to give you some information so you can help us out on this situation. I am a member of OHMM. At this time, we're trying to, what our organization is basically doing is making sure that these laws do get changed for people who are living with HIV and having to suffer more than needless be, because at this point the laws do not go along with the signs of what's happening in the world. There's a coalition of organizations that are sort of dedicated to ending this whole criminalization in Ohio. Part of the larger organizations that you may be familiar with in the state is the AIDS Task Force of Greater Cleveland, AHF Ohio, Equality Ohio, Canopy, Equus Health, and the University of Toledo, the College of Medicine. The stigmatization that comes along with the laws is the tough time. But what you may be learning today and what to expect, as we were saying, it's a time to modernize the Ohio laws. Learn it. You're going to learn a little bit about our efforts and what we're doing. Understanding why modernization is needed now. Get some educational insights. And maybe a deeper understanding about the HIV cases in Ohio and what some of the people who are living with have had to go through. If you're on your for CEUs, remember you got to go all the way to the end. If you are using as you work with us and live with and go through the webinar, there are some social media hashtags that we use. Modernize now, HIV is not a crime, HIV law 2021, and then OHMM. Be sure and use those. That'll help get the message out, or at least get people to check and see what these hashtags mean. So we do appreciate it if you would use them as you go along. Now I want to introduce you to the person who will be giving the webinar, Delaney Barr. She's an attorney with Equality Ohio. She works in their legal clinic. She's originally from Northern Illinois, but has family in Ohio, and always has viewed Ohio as going back home. Delaney attended Butler University and obtained her undergraduate degree in international studies. She is a 2018 graduate of George Washington University Law School. Prior to joining the legal team of Equality Ohio, Delaney was a legal storyteller for vulnerable communities, specializing specifically focused on family law, personal injury litigation, landlord-tenant negotiation, alternate dispute resolution, and trial practice. Delaney is passionate about working with members of the LGBTQ plus community and is dedicated to making Ohio a safe and supportive place for everyone. When Delaney is not engaged in community lawyering, she can be found with her nose in a book or a paintbrush in her hand. Delaney is passionate about learning new skills and information and strives to grow both at work and in her personal life. Delaney is based in Columbus, Ohio. I'm going to turn it over to Delaney now. As I said, be sure and make sure you have your questions as it goes along. And I'll let Delaney explain a little more as the webinar goes on. Welcome for being here. Okay, go ahead, Delaney. Sorry. Welcome for being here. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much for that great introduction. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Delaney. I am a staff attorney at Equality Ohio. I specialize in direct representation of folks who are living with, as well as community outreach, engagement, and education. So, a couple of the learning objectives that we have for today. Familiarity with how courts across Ohio keep their records and how this impacts people living with HIV. Understanding the inconsistencies across Ohio with how the laws are implemented, and increased knowledge about how many criminal cases are filed against people living with HIV across Ohio's 88 counties. Okay, so the road so far. Let's talk about our starting point. Equality Ohio and the Ohio Health Modernization Movement started in 2014. There was a data collection effort prior to 2014, and so we started with 2014 to 2020 as the years that we wanted to take a look at. What are we looking at? Well, there are 6 laws in Ohio that punish folks who are living with HIV. We have a felonious assault law, solicitation, loitering to engage in solicitation, prostitution, harassment with a bodily substance, and selling or donating blood. So let's talk about what these laws are in plain language. Prostitution is the actual act of trading something of value for sex. Solicitation, on the other hand, is the attempt to trade something of value for sexual favors. This could even be a conversation about that. Loitering to engage in solicitation is different. This is when you're in a public space and you intend to have a conversation, soliciting to trade sex for something of value. Harassment with a bodily substance, on the other hand, has gone by 2 different names in the past. Harassment by an inmate and harassment with a bodily substance. It's the same law. You don't have to be an inmate in order to be charged with this, but this one means annoying or threatening somebody with your fluids. This could be any fluid. So urine, feces, blood, semen, spit. Spit counts. That one's a big one. And selling or donating contaminated blood. This is a law that's on the books prohibiting someone who is living with from selling or donating blood, plasma, organs, any other kind of tissue. The big one that we have on the books is felonious assault. This one is a little bit tricky, so I want to explain the 3 different things that you as a person living with are prohibited from doing under this law. So the first one is having sex with someone without disclosing your HIV status beforehand. As a note, the law really defines sex very broadly. So there are many different acts that are considered under this definition. The second thing is having sex with someone when you, the person who's living with, know or think that the other person can't understand the significance of your HIV status. And the third piece is having sex with someone who's younger than 18 years old if they're not your spouse. Those are the 3 things that are prohibited under the felonious assault law. And as you can guess, if you violate them, it is a felony. We're going to talk a little bit about what our process was in Ohio and what we were really going for when we did this project. To try and get a sense of what was going on in Ohio, the facts on the ground, we came up with a number of questions that we wanted answers to. Who arrested you? What county were you arrested in? What were you charged with? When were you charged? How old were you when you were arrested and the criminal case was filed against you? What is your race, ethnicity, and gender? As a note, the records that we found with the courts are very, very limited when it comes to gender. It appears that the gender is only male and female because this is what the arresting officer viewed your gender as and what they listed on the arrest report. We are not gathering data, unfortunately, about folks who are in our transgender community, our non-binary community, or anyone who falls outside of male or female. The other information that we wanted to gather was about the person who went to the police in the first place. As a note, in these cases, the person who is living with is called the defendant, and the person who went to the police to get the charge started is the victim. We also wanted to know how the case ended and when did it end. Once we had the questions laid out, we had to link up who had the answers. So we ended up asking different people for different types of information. The clerk of courts primarily had the information about our cases. So what was the case number? When was it filed? What year was it in? How did the case end? When did it end? Etc. In each of the 88 counties in Ohio, there are a clerk of courts per county. The prosecutors were our second group that we reached out to. They had information about the initial charge, the arrest report, and some of the demographic information that I mentioned earlier: race, ethnicity, gender, age, those kinds of things. If these two sources didn't give us the answers we needed, we reached out to more nuanced areas. So a sheriff's office, a police department, the Supreme Court of Ohio database, and we did searching ourselves through online court dockets to get the information we needed. Let's talk a little bit why this was tricky. So each of the counties in Ohio does things differently. Some counties don't have any cases under these 6 laws. The reason for that is it's up to the police or the sheriff's office in each county to decide if they're going to arrest someone for breaking one of these 6 laws or not. After the initial arrest, it's up to the prosecutor to decide if there is a case that they want to file in criminal court against that person. So some counties aren't using these laws or filing criminal cases with these laws as the violating statute. In addition, if a county does have a case, each court has their own way of keeping records. So there's a law in Ohio called the Home Rule. This lets each county keep the records how they want to. So one of the tricky pieces in our research and our reaching out to these different counties was figuring out the different ways to communicate with each court to speak their language, to see what they needed us to ask to get the information that we needed. In addition, some counties have a system that's not built in a way that actually allows them to search for what we needed. So we had to do some online digging ourselves. One of these is Cuyahoga County. In Cuyahoga, you need to have a case number or a defendant last name in order to look up the information you want. Without those 2 pieces, they can't find anything in their system for individual cases or to create aggregate data, which is what we were trying to do. In Cuyahoga, we had to dig through each criminal case to determine if this is one of our cases that we were looking for. So what does this mean for people who are living with HIV? Well, depending on what county you're in, these laws may or may not be used against you. Also, if you're trying to look yourself for facts and figures across Ohio, it'll take you a lot of time to track down the information you need unless you have a specific case number or a person's last name. So, who has what data? Equality Ohio and OHMM have been collaborating with the Williams Institute. The Williams Institute is based out of UCLA, and they have arrest information from police departments and from sheriffs who have voluntarily shared the information. Now, as you may imagine, if the information is shared voluntarily, there are some big gaps in the information and what we were looking for. Cuyahoga County, for example, did not voluntarily share any information on this database. The Williams Institute also has information from the Sex Offender Registry. This is a mandatory reporting, so there are less gaps because it's not voluntary. Equality Ohio and the OHMM Data Project. So what we were looking at specifically is the criminal cases in Ohio in each of the 88 counties. This includes charges, conviction records, plea deals, and the disposition of these cases. Okay, so let's start with what counties have cases. On the screen right now, you have 2 colors. Yellow is the counties with cases, and green are the ones without cases. At the moment, based on the data we have information for all 88 counties. We have 42 counties with cases and 45 with no cases. For my visual learners who like lists, here are all of the counties with and without lists, with and without cases, listed alphabetically. I'm going to take a short break to allow folks to find their county. I know when I was originally doing this, I was talking to Kim, and Kim was saying, okay, well, where's my county? Are they one of the ones that have cases or one of the ones that doesn't? So I am going to go through each of the 6 case types, starting with felonious assault cases. This map shows what counties have at least one felonious assault case. we have 15 counties in Ohio that have at least one criminal case charging a defendant with a violation of felonious assault. These are Allen, Butler, Clark, Columbiana, Cuyahoga, Hamilton, Knox, Lorain, Lucas, Montgomery, Ross, Sandusky, Summit, Union, and Warren. In comparison, there are only 6 counties with solicitation cases. These are Allen, Cuyahoga, Franklin, Lucas, Montgomery, and Summit. There are only 3 counties in the state of Ohio with loitering to engage in solicitation cases. As a note, this is loitering to engage in solicitation after a positive HIV test. The 3 counties with cases are Hamilton, Franklin, and Lucas. Prostitution. While we would think this one is used more, there's actually only 1 county that has a prostitution case, and that's Stark County. So by this point, you may be thinking that we have 15 counties for felonious assault, 6 for solicitation, 3 for loitering, and 1 for prostitution. And there was some overlap there. What are we missing? What is the biggest charge that is used across all of Ohio? Harassment with a bodily substance is that charge. So I wanted to show this slide a little bit differently to highlight this. The counties in green are the ones that have no cases whatsoever. The counties in yellow, 40 counties, all have at least 1 criminal case dealing with harassment with a bodily substance. As a note, that is every county we have cases in except for 2 counties. Sandusky and Stark have no harassment with a bodily substance cases, but they have other types of cases. So the list of the counties that have a harassment charge is up here on the slide. In comparison, there is a law on the books that has no cases in Ohio where it's used. This is selling or donating blood. So far, we've covered what counties have each type of case. Let's take a look at the state overall. How many cases do we have in Ohio? At the moment, as of today, there are 192 confirmed cases in Ohio. 60 of these are felonious assault cases, 13 are solicitation, 4 are loitering, there's only 1 prostitution case, and a whopping 104 of them are harassment with a bodily substance. So for the visual learners, we have a bar graph of the different case totals. You can definitely tell that there is a very, very large gap between prostitution, solicitation, and loitering to engage in solicitation after a positive HIV test, and felonious assault or harassment with a bodily substance. Put a different way, we have a pie graph of the different case totals. Harassment with a bodily substance is easily over half of the cases in Ohio. Okay, so where are these cases? Let's take a look at a map now to see which counties have the most cases. So this map shows a range of the cases across Ohio. Dark green indicates there are 0 cases. A lime green color is 1 to 4 cases. Yellow is 5 to 9. Orange is 10 to 14. And red is over 15 cases. We've got 3 counties that have red. As a note, Franklin County is in that lime green category, even though they are a pretty big city. So which county has the most cases? This is the percentage breakdown of the counties. The top 3 counties that have cases, Cuyahoga is the first with 31%, Hamilton is the second with 15%, and Lucas and Warren are tied for third with 9.4% of the cases. This map in particular has a couple of unique features. So at the top of the map, you can see a key. This key shows the number of people who are living with in different colors. The map also shows each county's total case numbers in blue. Let's take a look at Cuyahoga County, for example. This is in a dark color, so you're looking at over 480 people who are living with in Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga has 40 cases in that county alone. So you'll also notice that there is an asterisk by Franklin County's and Cuyahoga County data. This kind of looks a little bit into kind of the next piece, which is we have more cases in Cuyahoga County and Franklin County that we are verifying. So one of the things that I want to ask folks is, looking at this map, what stands out to you? For me, one of the biggest things is that even if you have a dense population who are in a city, for example, Franklin County has a lot of folks who are living with, but not a lot of cases. In comparison, you have 10 cases in Warren County when that is a relatively light density of people who are living with in the county. One of the things that may explain this, and we're digging farther into the why of the data, not just what the data says, is there is a correctional institution in Warren County. So we noticed that there are a number of harassment with a bodily substance cases that are filed where the correctional officer is the person who is complaining about either being spit on or some other type of fluids. That increases the number of harassment with a bodily substance cases in the county, even if there's less folks who are living with. We do not currently have the ratios of how many harassment with a bodily substance cases are in a correctional institution or are in the general public. That is kind of phase 3 of our next piece. We do. So ratios overall for county cases, there are a total of 192 confirmed cases as of today. 60 of those are felonious assault, 13 are solicitation, 4 are loitering to engage in solicitation after a positive HIV test. There's only 1 prostitution case, and 104 of our 192 are harassment with a bodily substance cases. One of the pieces of information that we have gotten recently is, all right, we're hearing a lot about folks who are stopped or arrested, and they are people living with. Why aren't these reflected in the number of cases that we have across Ohio? Well, one of these pieces is that folks who are arrested are being given a choice in that moment in this discussion with the arresting officer. This may be the case, and it's what we've heard from people who are living with out in the community. So the choice is this. If you are picked up for solicitation and you are a person who is living with, the arresting officer may say, okay, I could charge you with a felony solicitation case if you make this arrest and criminal process difficult, or if you're willing to comply with this arrest and you're not going to dispute it, I can just charge you with the regular misdemeanor solicitation case and not bother with the HIV portion that would make it a felony. So one of the things that this might tie into is why the Attorney General thinks that having these on the books provides people who are living with resources. We're still not sure there's actually a correlation there, but that is the new piece of information that we've got, and it explains why our data doesn't match with what we're hearing in the community. If this is happening with police officers or sheriffs as they arrest people, it's not written down, and it doesn't eventually make it into a criminal case where the criminal case would show if there was a plea deal, and it doesn't show up as just a conversation with the arresting officer. Yes, this process is highly unusual, and usually when there is someone who is arrested for a crime, they have an opportunity to speak with their lawyer. It's part of their Miranda rights. When they're arrested, you have the right to remain quiet, the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. So the fact that arresting officers are automatically choosing themselves to say, we can charge you with this or that if you make it easy on us, is suspicious. So let's talk a little bit about next steps. So Franklin and Cuyahoga County, as I mentioned earlier, we are still combing through about 700 cases each that we need to verify whether or not there are our cases. When we were originally going through the dockets for these are the cases that didn't have enough information for us to clearly tell, okay, this is a case dealing with our subsection that impacts folks living with HIV, or this is clearly not our case. So what we did is we reached out to each of these counties to get the indictment documents so that we could comb through a little bit deeper and see if they are our cases. In addition, we are gathering the demographic data, like I talked about earlier. So age, race, ethnicity, and gender where the online documents from the court or the prosecutor didn't have those pieces already. So at the moment, our goal is to get each of the counties to give us the demographic data that we need. We are down to 6 counties, and then we'll have the entirety of Ohio mapped out. One of the things that we're noticing is that some counties don't keep track of demographic data, and so we're going to have missing portions of our data because the county just decided not to keep track about someone's ethnicity, for example, or victim information. That's another area where we see a lot of data missing, is who originally called about the person living with to try and get them arrested. A collaboration with the Williams Institute is a very, very big update that I'm very excited to announce. So we are looking at publishing this data in collaboration with the Williams Institute. As I mentioned earlier, the Williams Institute is based out of UCLA, and there's a larger HIV criminalization data project that they are a part of. They wanted to focus on Ohio because we have a lot of clear data that our project has generated. And so we are going to be publishing that pretty soon. And publication, we're going to give the data to our legislators so that we can push for modernization because it is clearly needed. More data is coming in. As I mentioned, we have Franklin and Cuyahoga ongoing. So definitely tune into our webinars and the most recent updates as we go. One of the things that we are gathering information about, officers knowing the type of HIV laws off the bat. So one of the things that we would like to get information on eventually is what's happening with arresting officers and what's happening on the ground. Our data collection efforts is specifically what happens as soon as you file a criminal case and what happened to that case as it went along. We don't have information besides what they have voluntarily reported, and that's through the Williams Institute. If there are conversations that have been happening where you could choose solicitation as a misdemeanor or solicitation as a felony, I very much doubt that that is being voluntarily reported and is a part of the data that the Williams Institute has. It looks like there's a question in the chat about harassment with a bodily substance. So this can actually come from a variety of different people to start the initial charge. We have seen correctional officers in different prisons who have started this process. We've seen it coming from police officers. There have been charges from medical personnel who've been the first on the scene in an arrest, for example. That's another avenue. And then there are regular citizens who have come forward and said, hey, this person spit on me when they got mad at me. He's my neighbor. Can you arrest him? So there's a number of pieces that tie into who started a harassment with a bodily substance charge. The arresting officers are the ones who are first on the ground, and as a result of that, there is definitely an opportunity for discrimination, exploitation, systems that are built on white supremacy. Those are inherent, especially with police departments and even our justice system. So it definitely is part of our data that people of color are more susceptible to being charged with some of these pieces. For example, in Cuyahoga County, we are able to get some data already, even though we're getting more demographic data as we go. There is a piece of Cuyahoga County where we can tell 61% of folks who are charged with one of these 6 laws are a person of color. Specifically, 61% are Black, 2.8% are Hispanic, and 36.1% are white. So this is eventually what we want our demographic data to be able to do, is look across each county in Ohio where there are cases and take a look at Ohio as a whole to see who is being disproportionately affected by these laws. The way that we can track that is we are keeping track of the demographic information as we go with these different cases. That's providing us one lens of, race, ethnicity, gender, and age. But like I mentioned earlier, gender at this point is what the police officer assumed someone's gender to be when they did the arrest. We are missing out on the data from our trans folks, our non-binary folks, and the people who don't fall into male or female categories. So a victim is just who started the process with the police officers or with a sheriff's office.
Would you happen to know if the police officer themselves stopped somebody on the street and nobody complained about the person, who's the victim?
So that's one piece of why these laws really need to be modernized. If there is no one that complained or no one that brought it up to the police, it might actually be the correctional institution, the police office, not just the police officers, or the sheriff's department as the one who is filing this charge against the person. I definitely found the harassment with a bodily substance usage across all of Ohio to be really quite shocking. We went into this with hearing about how loitering, to engage in solicitation after a positive HIV test, prostitution, and solicitation were really kind of the push behind the Attorney General's use of these laws. And we found that there are a handful of cases, if that actually use these in Ohio. And so harassment with a bodily substance being the biggest chunk of cases that we have was surprising to me, especially as I did more digging and found there was some correlation with different correctional institutions as a part of this. What rights does the person arrested have in a court of law? So one of the main things that I really highlight at the beginning is you have rights as soon as you're arrested. And, these are pieces that we want to make sure that everyone knows. So I mentioned earlier about Miranda rights. As soon as you are arrested, you have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. You have a right to a swift criminal process. That is one of the pieces in our justice system that's automatically given to you. We want to make sure that whenever you have a criminal case that's filed against you, you are able to not be stuck in the system for an extended amount of time. As a note, this doesn't always happen, and that's when a violation of constitutional rights happen. So wanting to make sure that folks know you have those Miranda rights, like I said, but as a person who's living with, if you are arrested, there's also a list of things that we want to highlight that you can not do and still be okay. So you can choose not to disclose or discuss your HIV status to law enforcement officers. You can choose not to discuss or talk about whatever the incident is without your attorney present. You can choose not to sign anything without consulting with an attorney first. And you can choose not to consent to any medical tests, including a blood draw or a saliva swab. So one of the things that we out the gate recommend is don't say anything except explicitly saying, I want to exercise my right to an attorney, and I will not speak to you without my attorney present. That is something you got to be really clear with as soon as you're arrested, so that you are not stuck in a loop where police officers will continue to try to talk to you. Do not talk to them. They can try to engage in conversation with you. They can try under the law to speak with you or speak to their partner about you to try and get you to engage in conversation. As soon as you speak to them, you are disclosing information that can be used against you in a court of law. So that is a big piece that we wanted to emphasize right off the bat. Which of the 6 laws do you think is the most stigmatizing? Honestly, each of these laws by themselves are incredibly stigmatizing to people who are living with. They don't follow science. So one of the pieces that really struck me is that a harassment with a bodily substance case, there's no risk of transmission for HIV. So if you spit on someone or urinate on someone or throw feces on someone, there isn't a way for you to pass along the virus through any of those methods. It's not one of the ways that HIV can be contracted. So that, to me, is just furthering an additional crime against people who are living with, because harassment with a bodily substance is normally a misdemeanor, but when it deals with someone who's living with, it automatically becomes a felony. Another one of these laws that really strikes me is the felonious assault law. So felonious assault, like I mentioned, there are those three pieces that you can't do. You can't have sex with someone without disclosing your HIV status beforehand. You can't have sex with someone if you think or know that they can't understand your HIV status and the significance of it. And you can't have sex with someone who's under the age of 18 who is not your spouse. So those first two pieces are what I want to highlight right now. The law does not take into account people living with and the precautions that they are taking. So it doesn't take into account if you have an undetectable viral load. Undetectable means untransmittable, and the law is not up to date with current science. It doesn't take into account what precautions you took, whether it's a condom or other form of contraceptive. It does not follow with privacy. One of the things that is really stigmatizing is that you have to disclose your HIV status before you have sex with someone. And the biggest piece of this is disclosure. You know, trying to prove to a court that you had a conversation with someone is difficult. So this might require the person who's living with to get creative about it and disclose their status, which is a very personal thing, to someone else while they're video recording them, or in a medical doctor's office, or signing a document with a date and a time to try and prove that you did what the law requires you to do. One of the questions that we have in the chat is, do we have data for when a person already serving time is charged when they're in prison? Yes. So some of the harassment with a bodily substance cases that we found are actually in the indictment records. We can look up the case online. We can go into that specific case's documents if it's on the online portal, or request it from the court to see when the person was charged. And in those indictment documents and in the court orders that come out, there's usually a portion that says, this is a person who was in this correctional institution. They are serving time for X crime, and there was an additional crime committed. That is what we're here for. It is a harassment with a bodily substance case. So if we're able to dig into those cases to get more information, I'm sure that we could find which cases deal with a person who's already serving time and is charged with an additional harassment with a bodily substance charge. One other question we have in the chat at the moment is, does any of the data show a person charged with a felony and being negotiated to a misdemeanor, or vice versa? Yes. So in the information that we gathered, we looked at what was the initial charge and if there was another charge that happened afterwards. So when there is a criminal case that is filed, the case is based off of what the arresting officer or the sheriff's department think the violation is. That's the initial charge. This is also what the prosecution has based their case off of. And there are, in the terms of a criminal case, there's a process where the prosecutor is able to talk with the defendant and the defendant's attorney to negotiate. This often results in a plea deal where there was an initial charge, but the prosecution will agree to a lesser charge if the defendant waives a right to a speedy trial and will admit on the record that there is guilt. They admit guilt on the record. So this is an instance where our disposition data that we've been collecting shows if a person has entered a plea deal, and it also shows if the prosecution has refused to go forward with the case or prosecute it, which is called nollied. So in Cuyahoga County, we have specific data for this already. As I mentioned, I was doing a little bit of digging, and I wanted to see what exactly was happening with Cuyahoga. We have in Cuyahoga, 55.6% were actually plea deals. That's how the case was resolved. 19.4% of those were dismissed. The prosecutor decided not to prosecute in 22.2%, and only 2.8% of cases resulted in a conviction. This is the data that we want to get across the board so that we're able to report it in each county in Ohio and what things look like across the board in Ohio so that we can push for this modernization. So one of the things that we have been hearing from members of our community is when you have been charged with loitering to engage in solicitation after a positive HIV test, there is a frequency where the police, if you're out and about in the public, that is at a minimum enough for you to be charged with a loitering, because all you have to be doing is existing in a public space and have the intent to solicit. So if you're already known to the police as a person who is living with, if you're walking down the street to the corner store, if you are walking around the block, if you're at a public park and you're talking with someone, you are at risk of being charged with loitering.
We want to thank everyone for attending today. Don't forget to fill out your evaluations. We appreciate you being here. If you are interested in possibly being involved with our organization, OHMM, reach out to Kim. You'll see it on the last of the page of the webinar. And if you still have some questions about it and you want to talk to members who are there, you can reach out to me. But at the same time, we appreciate you being here. Hope you learned something. Don't forget to leave out some, leave questions if you still had some questions there. Hopefully we helped you understand a little more. Thank you very much. Pay attention also to OHMM's website. We will be continuing to have educational webinars throughout the year. And we do appreciate it if you spread the word about them, especially if you've learned something. Thanks a lot. And you guys have a good day.